I want to talk to you today. We're on a series called The Stories of the Bible. How many of you have read the book of Gideon, or the story of Gideon? Anyone? Few, I see like 4 hands that went up. Gideon is a character in the book of Judges. And the book of Judges is in the Old Testament, and one of the interesting things about Judges is that it goes in a cycle. For 16 chapters, again and again and again and again and again, and 16 times over, it goes in the same cycle. And what would typically happen is that Israel would start worshiping God, and slowly they would turn their back away and then fall into a mess. When they were in that mess, they would cry out to God because they were in a mess. God would come and save them. And now that they're saved and life is comfortable and everything's good, they would forget about God and land themselves back in that mess. And I want to talk to you today about why sometimes we stay stuck in the patterns that we do. Don't raise your hands. In fact, today, don't raise your hands at all. But why do we stay stuck? Do you ever feel like you're stuck? Addictions that you can't break out of, bad habits that you've made, I don't know how many resolutions, and then Monday comes and all the resolutions out the window. You try to break out of that pattern, and yet you cannot. And so today what I want to talk to you about, the title of my message is Dealing with Fear. Can we say that once together? Dealing with my fear. Let's say it again. Dealing with my fear. God, help us today to deal with our fears. Help us, God, to break out of the patterns that we feel stuck in. I pray, God, as we look at the life of Gideon, as we look at the truth of your word, would you bring forth your power and change our lives? Amen. Let's start reading in Judges chapter 6. We will start a bit of a long story. Part of the fun of doing narratives and stories in the Bible is that we read longer portions of Scripture. So bear with me today. But let's start. If you have a Bible, it would be useful if you open it on your phone and scroll along just so that you can keep track. But in Judges chapter 6, verse 1, it says this: The people of Israel did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord gave them into the hand of Midian 7 years. Notice the pattern. The people of Israel did what was evil against God, and God gave them into the hand of Midian for 7 years. In verse 6, Israel was brought very low because of Midian. And then the people of Israel began to cry out to the Lord. So we see this pattern begin. Israel did evil. They were brought low. When they were brought low, then they began to pray and cry out to God. And this is what God tells them in verse 7. When the people of Israel cried out to the Lord on account of the Midianites, God says to them, I am the Lord your God. And let's say this together. You shall not, let's try that again. You shall not fear the gods of the Amorites in whose land you dwell. So God goes to them and says, do not fear the gods of the Amorites in whose land you dwell. But you have not obeyed my voice. What does that mean? What does that mean? God goes to them and says, do not fear the gods of the other lands. Meaning every land that they lived in had other gods. And God's command was to them was, do not fear their gods, because if you do, you will begin to serve them. If you fear other gods, you will serve other gods. If you do not fear them, they will have no power over you. And so that is what God went to the Israelites and said, do not fear the gods of the other lands in which you dwell. Let me ask, what does that mean for us? What is the land that we dwell in? Bangalore? Karnataka? India? Now, many times we think the gods of the land are the other religions. But what that really means are, what are the things in our culture that cause us to fear? Let me put it like this. If I am constantly afraid of failure, then success will be my God. If I am constantly afraid of lack, then whether I say Jesus is my God or not, money will be my God. If I'm so afraid of suffering, then comfort is going to be my God. If I'm so afraid of rejection, then I will do anything to fit in. I will compromise on everything that my faith says, because my ultimate God is acceptance. No matter what. Because I fear rejection in my heart, I will do whatever it takes to be accepted. What are the gods of the land in which you dwell? When we think about a city like Bangalore, we think about the culture that we live in, part of this message is inviting ourselves to think about, what are the things that I fear in my heart? When we say other gods, I don't mean other religions. What I mean is, what are the things that you so fundamentally fear in your heart that when it comes time to putting God first, you cannot? Because that fear of that thing will ultimately hold a place in your heart. Can I poke at you for a second? Look, I'm not, I don't want to be legalistic about this. But it's pretty common that the moment exams come, I have no time for God. Right? Why? Do I not believe that He can help me and cause me to succeed and let His favor rest on me and cause me to prosper? No, but I fear failure. And because I hold on to that fear of failure, every time I'm in an opportunity where I can fail, then suddenly success is my God. When I started working, I was so afraid of living in lack. And so I would save up, and I would save up some more, and I would save up some more, and I would save up some more, until money became my God. Not that I would bow down and worship money, but every time I had to, a little compromise here, a little compromise there, it was easy. And so God is telling them, do not fear the gods of the land in which you dwell. And they had not obeyed His voice. Let's keep reading now. This is how God comes to Gideon. In verse 11, this is what it says. Now an angel of the Lord came and sat under a terebinth tree at Ophrah, which belonged to Joash the Abiezrite, while his son Gideon was beating wheat in the winepress to hide from the Midianites. So Gideon was the son of Joash. He was kind of working in his father's business, and an angel came and met with him. And he was not the bravest guy. He was hiding from the Midianites, and so that's why usually what happens is you have to beat wheat in the open so that the dust can fly away. He was hiding underground and doing it underground. And so the dust wasn't really flying away. But just out of fear, he was willing to compromise. Verse 12, the angel of the Lord appeared to him and said to him, sorry, I lost my slide. The angel said to him, the Lord is with you, O mighty man of valor. And I love this. This is what Gideon says in verse 13. Please, my Lord, if the Lord is with us, why then has all of this happened to us? But now the Lord has forsaken us and given us into the hand of Midian. Just look at him for a second. I don't know how you would respond if while you were working, imagine yourself on Monday morning at your desk, and suddenly while you're working at your desk, an angel comes and stands beside you. Full glory, supernatural, and says, "Oh, mighty man of valor, God is with you." And his immediate response, like he barely waited a second, "Are you sure? If God is with us, then why is this happening? And why is that happening? And why is life so bad? And if God is really with us, why are we in this situation? And why am I having to work underground over here? And if God is really with us, why is my life like this? Immediate response. And then this is what God says in verse 14. Notice how God did not care about his complaining. No response to his complaining. So Gideon gives God this big complaint of God is with us. Why is all these bad things happening? And God says, go in this might of yours and save Israel from the hand of Midian. Do not I send you? Aren't you glad sometimes that God doesn't listen to your complaining? Man, as we have a natural tendency to complain. And I'm so glad that God doesn't hold our complaining against us. And so God encountered Gideon, and his first response was to complain, and God's response back was, ignore all the complaining, go in this might of yours, Gideon, and save Israel from the hand of the Midianites. But notice this. What did Gideon say to God? You have forsaken us. Was that true? No. They had forsaken God. And one of the things that fear causes us to do when we live in fear and our whole mindset is shaped by fear, we begin to lose sense of reality. Our perception begins to be slightly warped. The way we see the world is impacted. Your reality of life and my reality of life is impacted every time I live in fear. Because Gideon's response was, God, why have you forsaken us? When in actuality, Israel had turned away and did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. Goes on and it reads in verse 15. So the angel calls Gideon and says, go in this might of yours and save my people Israel. And this is what Gideon says. Please, Lord, how can I save Israel? Behold, my clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my father's house. And the Lord said to him, but I will be with you, and you shall strike the Midianites as one man. What did Gideon say to God? I am the least. I am weak. I am not good enough. And what did God say to Gideon? You are a mighty man. As one man, you will see victory. I will be with you. Go. And we see this constant contrast in what Gideon said versus how God responded. What was Gideon's fear? Can anyone guess? Spot it, it's in the verse. What was Gideon's fear? You shout, I can't hear you. Self-doubt. Anyone else? Any thoughts? Insecurity? Self-esteem? What was Gideon so afraid of? His self-worth? That he'd be a slave to the Midianites? What did he say to God? I am the least. In other words, I am insignificant. God, why me? I am so unimportant, insignificant, weak, unrecognized. Nobody knows me, and nobody cares about me. We go on in the story, and this is the funny part. That night, the Lord said to Gideon, take your father's bull and pull down the altar of Baal that your father has, and cut down the Asherah pole that is beside it. So the first thing God goes and tells him to do was go into your house, your father's house, and pull down all the idols. So Gideon took 10 of his servants, and did as the Lord had told him. I like this part. But because he was too afraid of his family and of the men of the town to do it by day, he went and he did it by night. So the first mission that God told Gideon was go to your house and clean up and clean out all the idols that are in it. And so he responds, but fearfully. So he went and did it at night. But he did it anyway. And I like this part. In verse 30 it says, the men of the town said to Joash, who was Gideon's father, bring out your son that he may die. And this is how, so basically what had happened was they all came in the morning and they found these idols smashed on the ground. And all of them were upset. How could you do that? The disrespect. You are not worshipping the gods that we fear. Right? And so they called for Gideon to come out so that they would kill him. And then Gideon's father responds and says, will you contend for Baal? If he is God, let him fight for himself, because his altar lies broken down. Think about this. Who set up that altar? Whose house was it? It was his father's house. And then who went and fought for Gideon and protected him? The same father that built that altar. And so the father responds to the men of the town and said, if Baal is God, Baal can fight for himself. You don't need to come over here and fight for him. But look at this. Despite Gideon's fear, he obeyed God. And because he obeyed God and his father saw him step out in faith and obey, his father also suddenly came to his senses. It's stupid to worship idols. What are we doing? If Baal is really God, let him fight for himself. The same man that built the idols no longer trusted in it because of his son's courage. Some of us wonder, can we really impact our families? When your families see you live in faith, suddenly they'll come to their senses. It's so stupid to fear lack. Of course we can be generous. It's so stupid to fear failure. Of course we can trust God that we will prosper. But it's only when they see you do it that they will begin to live that way. So one of the questions we need to ask ourselves is, when we step out in faith, not only how will that impact our life, how can that impact the lives of people around us by our courage? Let's keep reading on in the story. Now we're in chapter 7. It says this, the Lord said to Gideon, so just because the story is over 3 chapters and I don't want to read the whole part, quick recap. The people of Israel walked away from God. God called Gideon. Gideon was afraid. He felt insignificant. The first thing God told Gideon to do was tear down the altars and the idols in his house. And then he said, okay, now we're ready. Let's go fight against the Midianites. So let's pick up in chapter 7. And God said to Gideon, the people with you are too many for me to give the Midianites into their hand, lest Israel will boast over me, saying that my hand has saved me. So basically there were 22,000 people that all came with Gideon and said, we will fight with you, we will be the army, let us go, take back our land and fight against the Midianites. So these 22,000 people gather together, and the first thing God responds to them and says, too many. So this was his filter. Whoever is fearful and trembling, let him go home. Notice that Gideon didn't have that option. So out of the 22,000 people, let's do the math, 12,000 left and 10,000 stayed back. So 12,000 people were fearful and trembling, and so they went back and 10,000 stayed. And then God said again to Gideon, the people are still too many. 10,000 is too much. So this was his next test. Take them down to the water and I will test them for you there. And then basically the test was, let them all go to the water and drink water. And there's some of them that will cup the water and drink it. And some of them that will put their face to the water and lap it kind of like a dog. Funny story, I don't fully get the logic, but with the 300 men who lapped, so out of the 10,000, 9,700 cupped the water and drank. And God said to all of them, go home. We don't need you anymore. Take a break. And then there were 300 finally left. So this is how small the army became. It started off, quick typo. It started off with 22,000 people. It then came down to 10,000. And then all the way it came down further to just 300. 300 people. If I was Gideon, I would be scared once again. Like if I'm going and fighting and the 22,000 people behind me, little brave. If I'm going and fighting against an entire army and now there are only 300 people standing behind me, little scared. And so in chapter 7, verse 9, it said, the same night the Lord said to him, so all the army began to shrink, and God goes again to Gideon and says, arise and go down against the camp, for I have given it into your hand. And then he goes on and says, but if you are afraid to go down to the camp with Purah your servant, and you shall hear what they have to say, and afterward your hand shall be strengthened to go down against the camp. And then what did Gideon do? Then he went down to the camp. What does that tell us? What does that tell us? He was still afraid. So God says to him, if you're afraid, then go and spy in the camp. And what did Gideon do? He went and he spied in the camp. He was still afraid. So Gideon went down into the camp with his servant Purah to the outposts of the armed men who were in the camp. Notice that God continued to use Gideon despite his fear. Sometimes we think as Christians that God will only use us if we are full of faith and full of courage all the time. Can I just tell you that is not the case? However fearful, trembling, worried, anxious, cowardly we might be, God can still use us. So Gideon goes down to the camp, and behold, a man was telling a dream. A cake of barley bread tumbled into the camp of Midian, and came to the tent, and struck it so that it fell and turned upside down. And his friend began to interpret the dream and said, this is no other than the sword of Gideon. God has given into his hand Midian and all the camp. Notice that when God is on your side, even your enemies will begin to recognize it. When God is on your side, even the people that stand against you will recognize the favor of God on your life. So as soon as Gideon heard the telling of the dream and its interpretation, there he began to worship. It's ironic. The point where he finally began to worship God was when he stood in the face of his enemies. If you feel like your life is in a battle, don't run away. Face it. Something about standing there and facing the challenge that is in front of you will enable you to worship God. Because you see, even in the midst of that challenge, that God's presence is there. In verse 15, it says, as soon as Gideon heard the telling of the dream and its interpretation, he worshipped. And then he divided the 300 men into 3 companies and put trumpets into the hands of all of them. and empty jars and torches inside the jars. Notice that they didn't have any weapons. Not the best plan. So they had trumpets to blow in their ears, empty jars, don't know why, and then little torches to run with. And then Gideon says, when I blow the trumpet, all of you also blow the trumpets on every side for all the camp and shout. And this is what they had to shout. So the 300 men stood around the camp, they blew the trumpet, and this is what they shouted: for the Lord and for Gideon. Yeah? So that was, it's not the best anthem, but that was the anthem. For the Lord and for Gideon. And then the three companies blew the trumpets, broke the jars that they had in their hands, and they lit the torches, and in their right hand they blew the trumpet once again, and they cried out, a sword for the Lord and for Gideon. And every man stood in his place around the camp, and all the army of the camp ran. And they cried out and fled. Then it goes on and says, verse 22, when they blew the 300 trumpets, the Lord set every man's sword against his comrade and against all the army. So basically, out of fear, the Midianites began to kill themselves. Ironic story. And then the men of Israel were called out from Naphtali and from Asher and from all Manasseh. And they pursued after Midian, and they won over their captors. And they defeated Midian with 300 men. And I want to quickly then read the ending of the story, which is where things get interesting. It says, then the men of Israel said to Gideon, rule over us, you and your son and your grandson also, for you have saved us from the hand of Midian. Then Gideon said to them, I will not rule over you, and my son will not rule over you. The Lord will rule over you. So basically what had happened was, and this is entirely the book of Judges, God would raise somebody up because Israel turned their back on God and went into slavery. God would raise up a judge to come and save the people of Israel by stepping out in faith. And then typically the people of Israel would go and say to that judge, because you have saved us, we are indebted to you, come and rule over us now. And Gideon says no. But this is what he does say then. In verse 24, Gideon says, let me make a request of you. Every one of you give me the earring from his spoil. Typically what happened is when they went and won the battle, everything that they defeated from the enemy became theirs. So all 300 men got tons of wealth and sheep and cattle, and everything in their tent now belonged to them. And so Gideon goes and says, all the earrings that you collected, all the gold earrings, let me have that. I won't be king, I won't rule over you, but at least let me have these gold earrings as my prize money. And then it says Gideon made an ephod of it. So he took all the gold and he made an ephod of it, and he put it in his city in Ophrah. And all Israel whored after it there. And it became a snare to Gideon and his family. Another word for ephod is a statue. What does a statue symbolize? Huh? What is the point of a statue? So the people of Israel went to Gideon and said, rule over us. Gideon said no. But what he did ask them for is, hey, give me all the gold, and then he made a statue. What does that mean? Typically, people who make statues of themselves are trying to be significant. What did Gideon ask them to shout when they went into the battle? For God and for me. And then once he won, he didn't ask to rule. But that fear of insignificance was still not dealt with. And so he made a statue for himself to show everyone Look at how significant I am. And so the funny thing is, Gideon feared being insignificant so much that then he builds a gold statue, an idol for himself. Whatever we fear becomes our God. Whatever we fear and don't deal with becomes God in our life. And so we see in the verse that Gideon made an ephod for himself, and Israel whored after it, or in other words, Israel worshipped it. They worshipped his statue as God. And it became a snare to Gideon and his family. Look, the fact is that we can be successful on the outside. He won the battle. He freed the Israelites from slavery. Everything on the outside showed that he was successful. And yet he didn't deal with the fears on the inside. And so the moment he won the victory, he went back to still living in that same fear. God encountered him, and his response to God was, God, I am the least, I am insignificant. And then he won the victory, and now he showed everyone, look, I am significant. I am important. I am a big deal. And the funny thing is that he tore down his father's statue and idols, and then he built one of his own. He went and he criticized everyone in his village for worshipping idols. He tore it down, he stepped out in faith, and then at the end of the battle, he went and he built another one, this time in gold. And this is a sad ending. This is a sad sermon, I'm sorry. Most of the stories in the Bible are happy, but this one's not. As soon as Gideon died, the people of Israel turned again and worshipped the other gods and made Baal-berith their god. And the people of Israel did not remember the Lord their God, who had delivered them from the hand of all their enemies on every side. And they did not show steadfast love to the family of Gideon in return for all the good that he had done to Israel. Notice this. The moment Gideon died, everyone in Israel went back to worshipping their idols. But they also began to become unfavorable to Gideon. Funny thing is that Gideon led all of the people into victory, but he did not lead them into faith. He saved them from the Midianites and he saved them from slavery. But because he did not deal with the fears in his heart, they had no faith. Be very afraid when you have freedom, but you do not have faith. The invitation that God gives us is to have faith, and then our freedom sustains. But if we have freedom for a while from the thing that you're so worried about, it won't last you forever. How does this matter? When we compare Gideon with our true Savior, Jesus, we look at Gideon's behavior, and he was trying to make himself significant. Yeah? Unfortunately, through his life, he did many great things, and he won many great victories. But he did not deal with the fear in his heart. And yet we see Jesus, when he came down, emptied himself and made himself nothing. Born in a manger, not a palace. No statues, no gold, no fancy job. He was a carpenter in a remote town. Nobody recognized him. Nobody worshipped him. And yet he led people to faith. Gideon led people to victory, but Jesus led people to faith. So here's my invitation to you as we close. Do I, do you fear the gods of the land you are living in? And are you willing to deal with it? And typically we'll say things like, oh, money is tight, God will understand. It's okay. I'm living in so much lack, I don't want to live in lack, so I'm just going to hoard everything I have. God will understand. The pressure is so much right now. All those verses about God's favor will be on you. It's nice, but I don't really believe it. I must trust in my own strength. God will understand. I don't really have time right now. I'm so busy reaching my goals. I don't really trust that God can help me have a prosperous life. So let me put him at the back. He will understand. Let me put myself first. What is this? All this, love your neighbors. Seems like a waste of time. God will understand. You don't understand the friends that I'm friends with. They don't do all this spiritual stuff. In order to be accepted by them, I must live a certain way. God will understand. Do we fear the gods of our land? And if we do, my prayer is repent. Deal with our fears. I need to deal with my fear. You need to deal with your fear. And some of the dangers are that you can seem like you're successful on the outside, and yet that fear on the inside is not dealt with. And if you don't deal with it, and you don't bring it to God, and you continue to live with that fear in your heart, you will always have two gods. Hear me. You might say that, oh, we don't worship idols, David. I only believe in Jesus. Check yourself. I have to do it every day. I mentioned at the start of my career, I was very, very afraid of lack. And look, at that time, I didn't earn a lot. I earn more now. But just because I seem like I have abundance on the outside, it doesn't mean that I have dealt with the fear in my heart. And so Gideon on the outside looked like he had all the great victories. And yet the moment he won and they were back to freedom, he made that idol for himself and said, look everybody, I am so significant. And he fell back into the trap. So I'm asking you, take this seriously. Don't take it lightly. Please don't take it lightly. What are the fears in your life that you are making God? Is it lack? Is it failure? Is it acceptance? Is it significance? Is it approval? Whatever it is, my hope and my prayer is that we would bring it to God and deal with it. If you could come up and play. That's what I want to close with. One of the things we often feel is that fear will stop God from using me. If I have fear in my life, God will not use me. That's actually not true. The good thing is if you're sitting here and you feel like your heart is full of fear, God will still use you. But here's where the danger lies. God will still use you, but you will not trust Him. We will struggle to trust Him despite Him using us. And we will go through our life singing the song, I trust in God, but really that won't be true. And until we recognize, and bring to God the fears in our hearts, we will never truly be free. We will stay in the same pattern over and over and over again and wonder why life is this way. And we'll come to church, we'll sing the songs, nothing is impossible, and go on Monday and everything feels impossible. Please, my invitation tonight is bring your fears to God and ask Him, Father, help me. Help me to trust in You with all of my heart. I have found that everyone has one fear that they hold on to. It's not that you fear everything. For Gideon, it was insignificance. Everyone has one fear that they will hold on to, and that fear will always compete with God. My prayer tonight is that we would bring that one fear to God and say, God, I recognize it. Help me. Can we stand? It's okay. Can we take a moment in silence? And one of the prayers I usually pray is, God, tell me how this speaks to me. Tell me what I must do. God, what is the fear in my heart that I am still holding on to? So can you just ask God in your mind, God, what is the fear in my heart that I hold on to? Don't worry, it's okay. Just pray and ask Him, God, what am I afraid of? And He will speak to you. You will have something come to your mind. How many of you felt God say something to you? Let's pray. God, we come before You tonight. And if you're willing to and you feel like you really need freedom from God, I would ask you to just open up your hands and lift it to God and say, God, help me overcome my fears. Father, I do not want to be stuck in the same patterns of my life over and over again. So God, help me to overcome my fears. God, help me to overcome my fear of lack. God, help me to overcome my fear of failure. God, help me to overcome my fear of suffering. God, help me to overcome my fear of rejection. God, help me to overcome my fear of condemnation. God, I pray, would You break the power of fear from our hearts? Would You break the power of fear in our life? God, I pray that as we come to You tonight, we would come and bring our fears to You, and we know that in Your presence there is peace. Where Your presence is, God, that we will find peace. And so I pray, God, help us to have hearts of faith. God, help us to trust You. And when we sing the songs, God, that we really mean it. God, when we say that we put You first, God, help us to really mean it. I pray, God, that we would read stories like this and be sober-minded and deal with the fears in our life. God, we thank You for stories like Gideon that point us to the reality, God, without You, we are insignificant. But because we have You in our life, God, that is our true significance. So God, help us tonight. Help us tonight to overcome our fear as we trust in You. We know that you are our provider. God, you have accepted us. God, you cause us to succeed and to prosper. God, your favor on us is more than enough. And so I pray, God, help us to trust in you always. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.